When someone lives in your mind without contact, it describes a quiet but powerful psychological state in which another person occupies your thoughts, emotions, and inner world despite no ongoing communication, presence, or interaction. This experience is far more common than people admit, and it is not a sign of weakness or irrationality. It is a reflection of how the human brain forms emotional bonds, unfinished narratives, and meaning around people who once mattered, symbolized something important, or represented an unmet psychological need. The mind does not release connections simply because contact ends. Instead, it holds on to what feels unresolved, emotionally charged, or significant to identity and survival. Over time, this pattern develops when emotional intensity outpaces emotional closure. The brain, designed to seek patterns and resolution, keeps returning to the person as a way of making sense of what was lost, imagined, or left unsaid. Neurologically, memory, emotion, and attachment are deeply intertwined. So the absence of contact does not erase the neural pathways associated with that person. In many cases, distance amplifies them from a psychological standpoint. This phenomenon is rooted in attachment theory, emotional imprinting, and the brain's intolerance for ambiguity. Humans are wired to bond. When a connection forms that carries emotional weight, the brain releases neurotransmitters like dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin. These chemicals reinforce pleasure, safety, and meaning. When the bond is suddenly interrupted or slowly fades without resolution, the brain experiences a form of withdrawal. Yet unlike substances or habits, the object of attachment is a person who still exists somewhere in the world. This keeps the emotional loop open. The mind continues to replay memories, conversations, and imagine scenarios as a way of regulating emotion and maintaining a sense of continuity. Over time, this mental presence can become habitual, almost automatic, embedded into daily thought patterns. It is not obsession by default. Often, it is the mind's attempt to protect identity, process loss, or preserve a version of self that felt seen, valued, or alive in that connection. Human behavior around this state follows subtle but revealing patterns when someone lives in your mind without contact. You may notice that your thoughts drift toward them during moments of stillness, emotional vulnerability, or transition. Silence, nighttime, music, or familiar places act as triggers because they lower cognitive defenses and allow subconscious material to surface. People often interpret this as longing, but psychologically it is memory activation combined with emotional association. If you find yourself wondering how they would react to your achievements or struggles, it suggests that this person once served as an emotional mirror or source of validation. Your mind is not just thinking of them, it is revisiting a version of yourself that existed in their presence. This reveals a deeper need to reconnect with parts of your identity that felt affirmed, confident, or understood at that time. Behaviorally, people in this state often show restraint in outward action while experiencing intense inner activity. They may avoid reaching out, not because the desire is absent, but because fear, pride, unresolved hurt, or self-protection overrides impulse. This avoidance reveals internal conflict. One part of the psyche seeks connection or closure, while another prioritizes safety and dignity. The absence of contact is often a boundary enforced by logic, while the mind continues operating on emotional memory. When a person repeatedly checks old messages, replays interactions, or imagines future conversations, it indicates unfinished emotional processing. The brain is attempting to integrate the experience into a coherent narrative, and until it succeeds, it revisits the material. On the other hand, when someone does not show these behaviors, when they rarely think about the person or feel emotionally neutral, it does not always mean the connection lacked depth. It can indicate emotional closure, secure attachment, or effective cognitive processing. Some individuals are better at it, integrating loss and ambiguity because their nervous systems tolerate uncertainty more easily. Others may suppress thoughts as a coping mechanism, which creates the appearance of indifference while unresolved material remains buried. Psychologically, absence of visible behavior does not automatically equal absence of impact. The difference lies in whether the mind has resolved meaning or simply shut the door to avoid pain. Body language and subtle reactions also reveal this internal state. When the person's name is mentioned and there is a brief pause, change in posture, or shift in tone, it signals emotional activation. Even micro-expressions, such as tightened lips or softened eyes, indicate that the brain has stored emotional significance. Conversely, a flat response with no physiological change suggests either emotional completion or emotional distancing. Both are protective, but only one reflects true resolution. Decision-making patterns also shift under this psychological influence. People may hesitate to fully invest in new relationships, comparing others unconsciously to the person living. In their mind, this comparison is rarely about the actual person. It is about the emotional template they represent. The mind uses familiar emotional patterns as benchmarks, even when doing so limits growth. In daily life, this psychology manifests in common, relatable ways. Someone may hear a song and feel an inexplicable heaviness, not because of the music itself, but because it is linked to a memory. They may imagine conversations that never happen, rehearsing explanations or confessions that remain internal. They may feel an urge to share news but stop themselves, experiencing a quiet sense of loss. These behaviors reflect the mind's need for symbolic connection, even when contact is absent. The emotional bond continues internally because the brain does not differentiate sharply between real interaction and vividly imagined interaction. Both activate similar neural networks. Socially, this state can create emotional contradictions. A person may appear confident, functional, and engaged, yet privately feel tethered to an invisible presence. They may laugh and participate while feeling emotionally elsewhere. This split is psychologically taxing because it requires constant regulation. Subconsciously, they may seek people or situations that recreate the emotional tone of the original connection, not realizing why certain dynamics feel familiar or comforting. This can influence choices in friendships, work environments, and romantic relationships, shaping life trajectories without conscious awareness. Over time, the side effects of this mental occupation can intensify. Persistent rumination increases stress hormones, which affects sleep, concentration, and emotional resilience. The mind expends energy revisiting the past instead of integrating it, leading to mental fatigue. Self-esteem may suffer if the person interprets the lack of contact as rejection or inadequacy. The internal narrative can shift from reflection to self-blame, reinforcing feelings of unworthiness. Productivity declines not because of laziness, but because cognitive resources are diverted toward unresolved emotional processing. Relationships may feel unsatisfying because the emotional benchmark is anchored to an internalized connection. Rather than present reality, long-term, this state can contribute to anxiety, depressive symptoms, or emotional numbness if not addressed. The mind becomes caught between holding on and letting go, creating a chronic state of tension. Decision-making becomes cautious, sometimes avoidant, because moving forward feels like betrayal of an internal bond. Yet staying mentally attached prevents emotional freedom. This conflict affects overall well-being, shaping how a person views trust, vulnerability, and intimacy. It can also delay healing from grief, loss, or relational trauma. Psychologists analyze this behavior by observing patterns rather than isolated thoughts. They pay attention to triggers that activate rumination, emotional intensity disproportionate to present circumstances, and recurring themes in narrative language. They explore attachment history, especially early relational experiences, because unresolved bonds often mirror earlier attachment wounds. Emotional triggers reveal what the person symbolized, whether safety, validation, excitement, or identity. Subconscious signs include repetitive dreams, emotional reactions to unrelated events, and resistance to closure. Through behavioral analysis, psychologists examine avoidance patterns, emotional regulation strategies, and the stories people tell themselves about the connection. Importantly, psychologists understand that the person living in the mind is often a symbol rather than the individual themselves. They represent a feeling, a possibility, or a version of self that felt meaningful. Healing does not require erasing memory, but integrating meaning. When the mind understands what the connection fulfilled, it can seek that fulfillment in healthier, present ways. This process restores emotional autonomy and mental clarity. When someone lives in your mind without contact, it is not a flaw. It is a sign of emotional depth, memory strength, and a nervous system trying to protect significance. But growth begins when awareness replaces automatic repetition. The mind learns to honor what was without being trapped by it. And in that shift, mental space opens for presence, authenticity, and renewed connection with life as it is now.